Morning light drifted gently through the wide diner windows, the kind of soft light that makes everything feel a little calmer than the world outside. The chrome edges of the tables caught that glow, and the quiet hum of the coffee machine filled the air with a steady, comforting rhythm. In the corner booth sat a broad-shouldered man in a neatly pressed camouflage uniform. His name was Michael Turner, 52 years old, a retired Navy SEAL who had spent most of his life in places where the world moved much faster and far louder than this quiet roadside diner. These days, Michael preferred silence. He sat with a simple breakfast in front of him: eggs, toast, and black coffee. His hands were large, steady hands, the kind that had known both hardship and responsibility. At his feet sat his loyal companion, a calm German shepherd named Ranger. Ranger wasn't just a dog. For nearly 8 years, he had worked beside Michael overseas. He had been trained to sense danger before it arrived, to read people the way most of us read road signs. But this morning, Ranger simply rested quietly beside the booth, his ears occasionally twitching at the soft sounds of dishes clinking in the kitchen. The diner belonged to Arthur Collins, a 70-year-old man with silver hair and a warm smile that had welcomed travelers for more than 3 decades. Folks in town often said Arthur's diner wasn't just a place to eat. It was a place where people remembered your name. Arthur's daughter, Emily Collins, had been helping her father run the place ever since her mother passed away 5 years earlier. Emily was 32. Kind-hearted. Strong in a quiet way. That morning she moved from table to table with an easy smile, refilling coffee cups and chatting gently with the few early customers. She wore a light blouse and jeans, her blonde hair tied loosely behind her shoulders. For a while, the morning moved peacefully. But peace, as many older folks know, can sometimes be interrupted by people who bring their troubles with them. The diner door swung open suddenly. 3 large men stepped inside, wearing black leather jackets and heavy boots that echoed against the tiled floor. Their voices were loud, careless, the kind that ignored the calm of the room. The tallest of them, his name was Rick Dalton, looked around with a crooked grin. "Well," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear, "looks like the quietest place in town." The men slid into a booth near the center of the diner. Their laughter came rough and sharp, like gravel on pavement. Emily approached their table politely, the way she approached every customer. "Morning, gentlemen," she said kindly. "What can I get for you?" Rick leaned back in his seat, eyes wandering in a way that made the room feel smaller. "Well now," he said slowly, "service comes with a smile here, doesn't it?" The other 2 men chuckled. Emily kept her composure. Years of helping her father had taught her patience. "Coffee to start?" she asked gently. But Rick reached out and grabbed her wrist. Not hard enough to injure her, but hard enough to make the room fall silent. Across the diner, Michael Turner didn't look up immediately. But Ranger did. The dog's ears lifted. His eyes locked on the movement. Michael slowly set down his coffee cup. The clink against the saucer sounded louder than usual in the quiet room. He turned his head. For a moment he simply observed. Emily trying to remain calm. Arthur behind the counter, worry creeping across his face. And 3 men who had mistaken kindness for weakness. Michael took a slow breath. Older men learn something about timing. Life teaches you that not every moment requires force. Sometimes it only requires presence. Ranger stood up first. The German shepherd moved forward with quiet confidence, his paws making almost no sound on the diner floor. Michael followed. He walked slowly, the way a man walks who has nothing to prove. Rick was still laughing when Ranger stopped beside the booth. The dog didn't bark. He didn't growl. He simply stood there, alert, calm, watchful. Rick looked down. His smile faded a little. "Nice dog," one of the men muttered uneasily. Michael spoke then. His voice was low and steady, the voice of a man who had given orders in places where mistakes mattered. "Son," he said calmly, "that young lady asked you a simple question." Rick looked up at him. "And what's it to you, old man?" Michael's expression didn't change. "Respect," he replied quietly. There was something about the way he said it. Not loud. Not angry. Just certain. Rick glanced again at the dog. Ranger's eyes hadn't moved. Anyone who had ever been around trained working dogs recognized that look. It wasn't aggression. It was control. And control often meant experience. Michael rested one hand gently on Ranger's back. "He's trained," Michael said softly. "And he doesn't like seeing people treated poorly." The diner remained silent. Even the coffee machine seemed to pause its hum. Arthur stepped out from behind the counter slowly, standing beside his daughter. Rick released Emily's wrist. "Relax," he muttered, trying to laugh it off. "We were just joking." Michael nodded slightly. "Good," he said. Then he added, almost kindly, "Because kindness goes a long way in a place like this." For a long moment nobody spoke. Finally Rick stood up. He looked at his friends, then toward the door. "Let's go," he said. The three men walked out, their boots no longer quite as loud. The diner door closed behind them with a soft chime. Silence lingered for a moment longer. Then the room slowly breathed again. Emily let out a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Arthur placed a hand gently on her shoulder. Michael returned to his booth. Ranger followed, lying down beside him as if nothing unusual had happened. Emily approached the table a few minutes later. Her smile had returned, though her eyes were still a little emotional. "Thank you," she said quietly. Michael gave a small shrug. "Just doing what anyone should do." She glanced down at Ranger. "He's beautiful," she said. Michael's hand rested on the dog's head. "He's been a good partner," he said softly. Arthur walked over then, carrying a fresh pot of coffee. "This one's on the house," the old diner owner said warmly. Michael smiled. "You don't have to do that." Arthur poured the coffee anyway. "After 35 years running this place," he said, "I've learned something about people." He nodded toward Michael. "Good ones deserve free coffee." They all shared a quiet laugh. Outside, the morning sun climbed a little higher. Inside the diner, life returned to its gentle rhythm. And sometimes, for folks who would live long enough to see the world change again and again, that rhythm was all the reminder they needed. That strength doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it simply stands up. Sometimes it brings a loyal dog. And sometimes, in a small roadside diner, it reminds everyone in the room that kindness still has a place in this world.